about your own early childhood, in what ways did your siblings influence who you are today? Right? Was there a lot of influence, do you think? What are some examples? Think about your own childhood. The interactions you had with your... I hear, oh my gosh, what? Okay. Oh my gosh, my childhood. Right? My son was sharing with some of his friends, well, co-workers, he's a firefighter, and I was a tutor. I went to school the whole time my kids were growing up. I went to school their whole life. I'm still going to school. They joke because two of my granddaughters started kindergarten and I started doctoral programs. So they're like, you're still going to school. Now you got 3 generations, 2 generations of kids you're going to school for, right? So that's kind of the going joke. But when my kids were very young, I was a tutor at my community college, and I wanted to do a tutor project where I created a series of fetal dissection pig videos. You know how you have to go through the human biology lab, you have to do this fetal pig dissection? So I created a series of videos with like little quizzes at the end. I had a great time doing it. But it took me hours and hours to edit these, because I did it old school on VCR. Yeah, right. So I had these 2 VCRs and I had this fetal pig dissection stuff going on, right? And so the kids would come over, they have their friends like, what's your mom doing? Because we only live in a small house and we're all in the living room, right? I don't want to go to your house. Your mom's weird. All those weird videos about the reproductive system and stuff like that. So he was sharing this experience with a couple of his colleagues at work, because they talk about medical stuff, right? And he brought something up, and they just looked at him like, what kind of a childhood did you have? I got to meet your mother. She sounds like really out there, right? It's like, no, it was all for a purpose, right? But I know when my kids were growing up, conflict, right? But also great, memories of playing together. And we're going to talk about play today, so I'll use my kids and my grandkids as examples. But when you think about your own experiences, maybe what is one way that your siblings influenced maybe your social competencies, right? Yeah.
Language, and then also risk behavior and method of values.
Oh, yeah. So language development with swearing. Those words, and those are the words that kids always pick up on first, because we tell them, don't repeat that, and that's exactly what they do, right? Yeah, my kids would report, yeah, my mom's taking effing algebra right now. Oh, okay. I have a love-hate relationship with math. Well, algebra. Other math I love. Stats, great. Algebra, nah. Love-hate, right? So siblings do play a very large role in our own development, right? So in terms of the social behaviors, the ability to communicate with others, right, siblings do play a big role. And during early childhood, right, so our preschool years, we do make a lot of advances in our skills in terms of our social competencies, our abilities to relate to others, right, and also compromise. So in terms of looking at your own, early childhood development, or maybe you're observing early child development for others around you, there are a lot of positives to what's going on in terms of the social world. Especially with siblings, you have to learn to share, right? Well, that's the hope anyway, right? For the most part, this is where we learn to share, is in our families, right? So with our siblings, we have to share everything, right? Rooms, food, activities. We're doing everything together. So learning to share, but also learning to cooperate. And this really goes a long way. And when you have healthy models of sharing and cooperation with your siblings, children will take this to the outside world in terms of the friends that they make, right? And those other social activities that they engage in, right? And also that comforting. So when you have a sibling that is really distressed, you have other siblings that will kind of step up and comfort that, and sometimes step in and make things right on the playground, right? If they're, really close in age. I think I shared with you that my children are very close in age. When I was, when my first was 6 months old, I got pregnant with baby number 2. That's very close. And then I waited an extra 3 months with my second child, so my second child was 9 months old when I got pregnant with my third, right? So yeah, they were very close. I know, I don't even know how it happened, right? I think my husband just looked at me one day and I was pregnant, because we were just sharing water at that point, right? Because I was like, no more babies, right? And then we had that third. I was like, wow, we got to do something more drastic. But on the downside, there was a lot of tears, mostly mine, when they were in early childhood, right? Because I was overwhelmed at some points. If I could brush my hair in a day, I was happy. But on the upside of that, as the kids went through school, they were very close in age, so I had like a kindergartner, first grader, second grader. Very, very close. And I know that they know things about each other that I don't know, and I'm okay with that. I mean, nobody got arrested. I never got called down to the police station, so I guess I'm okay with it, right? So that closeness in age had pros and cons, right? There was a lot of conflict, right? But there was also a lot of protection within the school, you know, when they were going to school, a lot of looking out for one another, making sure things are good. And older siblings kind of stepping in and making things right with younger siblings, also kind of showing them the ropes for things, because believe it or not, there's kind of politics, if you will, to those friendships that we develop in elementary school. Elementary school kids can be mean, right? So when they have a hard time, when you have an older sibling to turn to, sometimes that older sibling can step in and say, hey, look, this is how it's got to go down. For example, when my youngest was in, I think she was like in the 2nd grade or 3rd grade, older sister who was just a grade above her said, hey, I noticed it, you know, during recess, you weren't playing with so-and-so and so-and-so. I saw you sitting over there, you know, in that weird, you know, over by the rings that you don't normally sit. What's going on with that? Why aren't you playing? Well, you know, this is what's going on, and so I'm not playing with them anymore, right? She could, older sister was very protective. Oh no, that's not how this is going down. So she went and fixed things. I'm not quite sure what happened, but I never got called into the principal's office, so I'm sure it was smoothed over quite nicely, right? But this is what we do. We have that protection. We have that, you know, that comforting, right? And this can happen very early. So this can happen as early as, you know, kindergarten, 1st grade, right? The negative, though, is that you can have aggressive behaviors that happen between siblings. It could be a lot of rivalry, for example, right? So this rivalry can actually have a lot of good that comes from it. When you have a rivalry with a sibling, it does really help kind of sharpen your skills, if you will, for social competence, right? And of course, with families, you're kind of stuck with your siblings, right? So you really have to make that effort to make things work because you're in close quarters, right? So you really have to work to make those things go, right? But also our siblings, believe it or not, as you kind of think about your own early childhood, there was a healthy amount of helping you develop your identity. You know, who are you, right? As well as later on your ability to rear your own children, because a lot of times you can draw on your own experiences as a child in terms of these are how the things these are the things that I want to happen, you know, in my own children's childhood, because these are the experiences that I had, you know, with my siblings. Now, in that family dynamic, if you do have parents that show favoritism, that can drive the rivalry up and sometimes resentment. And this is particularly problematic if the favored child is an older child. When you have, you know, 2, 3 kids in a family and the younger kids are favored, the older kids have a sense of they're more mature and they can understand, well, so-and-so's the baby of the family, I can understand, you know, the babying, unless it's, you know, just blatantly unequal between, you know, all the kids. So any favoritism that showed can increase the amount of conflict that you have in a family dynamic, but again, particularly problematic when you have an older child who's favored, because the younger ones have a harder time understanding that, and they really have a hard time in terms of coping. Why is that one, you know, the favorite? I'm the baby of the family, right? In fact, sometimes we have family dynamics where the baby will say, all right, no more babies, because I want to be the baby, right, for the rest of my life. I'm the baby, right? But this rivalry can be increased depending upon how parents are treating their kids. And so when you have that favoritism, that can kind of drive that conflict up. But in the bigger picture, siblings play a large role in your identity and your ability to have these healthy relationships that you can then use as a model to use out in terms of your friends, right? But what about outside of family? What about peer relationships? Do you think kids benefit from having peer relationships? Friends. Yes, we are social animals. I've been talking about this since day one. We like to be part of something. It's helped, you know, since the beginning of humankind. We've always hung out in tribes. It's been very good for our survival. In fact, just yesterday I was kind of joking with my other, I teach personality and social development. We were talking about how kids kind of hang out in tribes, if you will, right? They have like their preferred group, right, that they kind of hang with, right? So you can think about kids running out in tribes. Sometimes they are animal-like, right? Don't be offended. You're all animals, right? But what are some of the benefits of these peer relationships? When you think about kids who have friends versus those who do not, what are some of the benefits that you come to mind? What do you think of? Why are friendships beneficial? A what factor? A modeling factor? having that emotional support, right? Grade school's hard, right? We're just the beginnings of it, right? But when you have kids that are going to, so think about what period we're in, early childhood. So we are talking about, kindergarten, maybe first grade at the tail end of that, right? But think we have preschool and daycare before that, right? And kids do have, those friendships, and being a part of something, having that emotional support, right, is very, very helpful. And of course, when we have kids who have friends early, whether it be daycare, right, preschool, kindergarten, and first grade, that really helps them. It sets a beautiful, healthy foundation for them to do well in terms of their later social experiences, right? So lots of benefits to having these interactions. So when we have our friends, we have these social skills that we're kind of fine-tuning. So having play dates, for example, very beneficial. That play that goes on when you take your crew of kids over to your friend's crew of kids, right, and they're all playing together. There are so many great things that are going on. They're interacting outside of their siblings, and this is particularly helpful if you have a family dynamic where there's a lot of aggression between the kids. When you kind of break that up and you have play dates and you have other social interactions, right, that could be really helpful to kind of set that foundation for a nice, healthy way of communicating or relating to other people, right? So having peer interactions, having those play dates fosters very important social skills. These social skills lay that really important foundation at this age for developing relationships throughout our life. And again, we are social beings. We like to have those good, healthy connections with other people. But also, these interactions help kids learn how to lead and how to follow. So if they have different activities they're engaging in, you can't always be the leader, and sometimes that's a hard lesson for some kids, right? Because let's say you have an only child, for example. They're always the leader. They're always the one, right? But when they have their peer interactions, they learn, I can't always be the leader. Sometimes I have to let other people lead too, because when I always want to be the leader, not that many people want to play with me, right? So they're pretty quick to learn. For me to be a part of something in terms of being able to relate to my age mates, I have to act in certain ways. I have to include other people, and I have to sometimes be the follower, right? So there's a lot of, and practice makes perfect, but a lot of skills are being learned, right? And of course it helps with their physical skills and their cognitive skills, because play in the preschool years is very active play. We kind of talked about how, especially at once the kids get their legs, they've got their walking and then they start running, they run everywhere. It's very rare you catch like a 3-year-old just walking from place to place. They're running everywhere. They have so much energy, right? So there's a lot of physical skills, right? Their motor skills are being fine-tuned, right? But also cognitive skills, right? And also, again, kind of back to that emotional support. Having those peer interactions, having those friends can be very helpful in terms of having that emotional support, right? So by the age of 2, so at the very beginning of this early childhood stage, right, kids do have a preference for certain peers. And when we ask the young ones, who is your friend, right, they will talk about things in very concrete terms, right? Well, my friend is Billy, right, because we both play with trucks, therefore he's my friend. When in reality they might just be doing that activity a lot together, but not actually interacting a ton, but they have that common ground, if you will, playing with trucks. When we go to the sandbox, we're always playing with the trucks, so Billy is my friend, right? So they always kind of go to those those rudimentary ways of explaining, who's your friend? Oh, Billy, we play with trucks. Or if you ask little, Sally, who's your friend? Oh, Cindy, we play, in the kitchen together. So I was kind of flashing back to how they tricked me into school with the old kitchen set. Well, how you go to kindergarten, you have like that, the year before you attend, come check out the kindergarten, atmosphere, the experience, right? Because you're going to be starting kindergarten the following year. So you go in spring, and you check everything out. All I remember is the kitchen set, because I didn't have one at home. I'm like, oh my gosh, kindergarten's going to be great. I was so excited. Then they made me sit and pay attention. I was so disappointed. I really was, because I'm like, kindergarten playtime, right? I was so excited. And then I'd sit crisscross applesauce almost all day long. It really was a bummer. Punch and cookies was pretty good, right? But other than that, I felt I was kind of tricked in the whole school thing. I came around eventually, and I, of course, like school now, but I felt I was kind of tricked into it. But in terms of having friends, early on, especially in kindergarten, kids are very sensitive to the cliques that might happen, right? And having that acceptance is really, really important, right? So child's play, this is something I've mentioned before. Play for young ones is very, very important. They're gaining a lot of skills. They are gaining They're growing in terms of their motor abilities, they're growing in terms of their cognitive abilities, and there's a lot going on. It's very, very healthy to get kids together and play, use their imagination and so forth. The rate at which they do this will change depending upon the developmental stage they're at, and kind of look at some of Piaget's stuff. But during this time, we have what is known as dramatic play, right? This is where they're trying on new roles, right? So if you can imagine preschoolers engaging in dress up, right? Playing with the kitchen sets, right? Building all kinds of great things with the blocks, the Legos, that kind of stuff. They're really putting their imagination to use, right? But this dramatic play that they're able to engage in really helps push along their development in terms of their thinking skills, right? Because when kids are playing, their sense of curiosity, right, is really fine-tuned, if you will. Curious about how things work, for example. How high can I build those blocks? How high can I put them in different arrangements where I can make like a little castle, right? So I'm gonna have these little, I'm gonna have this little war going on or what have you, right? Exploration, right? And this idea of symbolic thinking. So think about children's world is exploding with new words, and so with these words, they shape the thoughts, and they kind of shape these symbols that kids can kind of hold in their heads, and they can use these during this dramatic play, right? But also in problem solving, right? So let's say they are building that tower of blocks. They're like, I have a hard time when I have this specific type of tower. It only gets so high, and then it really is easy to knock over. So maybe I'm going to, put a lot more blocks here down the bottom, kind of make a more solid base, for example, right? So this problem solving, the curiosity, all these things really help to drive their cognitive abilities because they're actively trying things out. And of course, according to Piaget, kids are like little scientists, and they continue in this stage, right, to try things out. They want to see how things work. They want to kind of push the boundaries of the things that they're playing with, right? And of course, play can also help with kids controlling their own impulses. For example, frustration. So let's say they're trying to build something and they're not able to do it, and they become very frustrated, right? That continued activity of engaging in that play, over time they can learn to kind of deal with their frustration a little bit better, right? So sometimes you have to step in and give them little songs, right? Who watches Daniel Tiger, for example? Daniel Tiger. Oh, well, maybe he's after you guys, I don't know. We watched some Daniel Tiger in our house. Actually, he's kind of, who watched Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood? That's kind of older stuff. Really, that surprises me. So Daniel Tiger took over Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood because Mr. Rogers retired, and he was an old guy, right? So Daniel Tiger came in, and he has songs about dealing, with frustration, right? It's okay to be frustrated, but it's not okay to throw things, for example, right? So he gives kind of those lessons about that. So sometimes you have these songs. I won't sing them for you, but some of that stuff can be really helpful. But this play allows them that kind of that outlet, right? To be able to say, okay, I'm frustrated because I can't build this tower of blocks. Now how can I deal with this, right? So play, lots of great things going on. So according to Piaget, so of course taking kind of a cognitive perspective on the quality of play that kids engage in, not surprisingly, the complexity of their play will change as children develop, right? As they develop these cognitive skills and gain these cognitive skills, the quality of play that they can engage in becomes more rich. So we have these 4 different types of play that kids can engage in that change depending upon their cognitive abilities. So we start here first in the sensory motor stage, right? We have what is known as functional play. So this is the very simple, repetitive, rudimentary type of play that kids can engage in, right? They're laughing at something, they're, at the end of that sensory motor period, they're able to, kick a ball, a light ball, not a really heavy, they're not, kicking around a yoga ball, for example, but, an appropriately sized and weighted ball. They can kind of roll the ball, kick the ball, right? Running and laughing, for example. So functional play is just that really, when you think functional play, think very basic, simple, rudimentary activities that kids engage in that are very enjoyable, right? Still in that sensory motor stage, we have that symbolic play, right? Also known as pretend play or dramatic play. This is occurring towards the end of that sensory motor stage, so closer to that age of 2 where they're able to, their world is really gaining a lot of ground in terms of the language they're able to use. They're able to hold more complex symbols in their own mind as a result of that, right? So they're able to now be a little bit more creative in their own thinking in terms of those play activities that they engage in. Still relatively rudimentary compared to constructive play and formal games, of course, right? But a lot of times these types of activities involve scripts. They're not highly structured scripts, but they oftentimes engage in those things that they observe. So for example, if you have kids that are playing in a kitchen set, right, they're going to kind of take on the scripts that they observe around them. What does mom and dad do in the kitchen? What kinds of things are older siblings? What kinds of things do we typically see happening? I'm going to engage in those types of things here, and we're going to play house, right? Still, you know, pretty unstructured, but now their imagination is really starting to take off, and they're able to kind of use their imagination to kind of make things happen, if you will, in that little kitchen set, or playing with dollies, right? I know you're picking all these girly things. Okay, boys in their trucks, right? Sorry, I'm a girl. I always kind of go back to the girl stuff, right? So symbolic play happening at the end of that sensory motor stage, right? Also known as pretend play. They're trying out things, they're still exploring, but their complexity is changing up a little bit. Then we get constructive play. So in early childhood, right, so we're seeing this development from 2 all the way out to about 6 or so, right? Constructive play is where kids are using materials to make something exciting and using their imagination to make things happen within that. So for example, whoever built forts out of pillows and sheets, right? Big example, or very common example for constructive play, right? Building the forts. I remember my daughter, I want to say, actually she was she was a little bit older, but I remember she had her friend over and they wanted to build a fan fort. Have you ever built a fan fort, right? Where you tie the sheet to the fan. They were a little bit older, they were out of the preschool years. I think they were like 8 or 9 maybe. Maybe that old, maybe a little bit younger. So they made fan forts where they tied the sheet to the fan, they turn the fan on, it makes the sheet go like this, and so you got like a fort underneath, right? And they decided, I don't know why, and I'm usually a good mom, I'm not perfect, but you know, they wanted to take that front screen off, right? I'm like, why are you doing that? Why would you do that? Someone's gonna get hurt, you really shouldn't do that. No, we're gonna be super careful, but it makes the fan blow better, right? I'm like, I'm really not comfortable with that. Well, we're gonna do it. So they did it behind my back after I told them not to do it, right? Next thing I know, fan falls over and I hear, the fan's going do, 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 and I hear do, 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 ow, ow, ow. Put the spray back on the darn fan. I can't send broken kids home to their parents, right? That I'll just be the laughing stock of the neighborhood, or I'm like, we can build a fan fort, but we have to do it with safe rules, right? So no more doing stuff behind my back, but I just remember kind of laughing at that. I'm like, I told him so.